Well, welcome to banddirectors.com. We're here at Wayne State University, and I'd like to introduce you to the band today. They're all members and students here at Wayne State University's Jazz Studies program. Mike Karloff on piano, Sam Trapchak on bass, Nathaniel Wynn on the drums. What we're going to talk about today is harmony. Now, at the beginning of this video series, I was talking about how typically when young students first approach improvisation, they often get the elements of harmony thrown at them as the foundation, the base of improvisation, which to a great degree, harmony is the base of improvisation. But it can be so overwhelming to a young student who's struggling to learn to play their instrument and to play major scales and to function in an ensemble and play in tune and play with good tone. The idea of absorbing all the great concepts of Western harmony can be a bit daunting and often turn a lot of young players off to improvising. They feel like it's just not something they can do. So the earlier videos gave some ways to hopefully encourage some confidence and give some tools for exploration that don't require a vast understanding of harmony. But what I'd like to do in this section is get into the concept of harmony, first simply, and then get to more intermediate activities for those students that are excelling. First, let's start with something simple, something a band director or a teacher can do. We're going to work with the 12-bar blues, in this case in B-flat, something that's common to a lot of band arrangements and jazz combo settings. What I'm going to ask the teacher to do, though, is first identify some notes that work well throughout the 12-bar form for the students. So once again, we're limiting the harmony that they have to deal with. Not asking them to learn every element of every chord, but rather to first explore improvisation, A, with the correct notes, and B, with some sense of rhythm and melody that we've discussed in the previous videos. So here we're going to play the 12-bar blues. Since we've already done a one-note improvisation in the rhythmic section of this demonstration, we're going to start with two notes. So I'm going to choose two notes on a B-flat blues that I could ask a student to improvise. They can play those two notes anywhere on their instrument. They can play with any rhythm they feel and with any expressive devices that are known to them. But basically what we're trying to get them to do is play correct notes throughout the whole form, experience playing correct notes inside the harmony, but develop a productive and ultimately musical improvised solo. So here's 12-bar blues in B-flat, and I'm just going to use the tonic and the sixth note of the tonality. So I'm playing on a concert B-flat and a concert G, creating a solo from those two notes that fit throughout the entire progression of the 12-bar blues. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, have a lot of fun and not be thinking about, is this a right note, is this a wrong note? You've told them those are both right notes. And as long as they stick with those, they can concentrate on swinging and being part of the musical environment. So let's go now. We're going to add a third note. This time we're going to pull a note from the blues scale, the flatted third degree of the tonic. So in this case, a D flat, a flatted third of B flat. Indeed, I could explain to you why it fits over each one of the chords, but you as a teacher have to come to that understand how harmony works, so you can feed your students these little bits of information. But here's three notes now: the tonic, the sixth of the tonic scale, and the flatted third. So I'm playing off a concert B flat, a concert G, and a concert D flat. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. has this note that has some color to it. They have the tonic, which is a grounding effect. The sixth tone, which is a little bit lifted from the harmony, but still diatonic in nature, and this flatted third. And of course, we can continue from there. Give the student four notes, as much as we can find in the harmony. Of course, on more complex harmonic environments, we'll have to be a little bit more creative about the notes we give them to improvise on, but that's not impossible. We'll go back to Just Friends for a minute. If I play on the first, if I have a note, concert C on the first two bars, and the second two bars go up a half step, and then return to that pattern for the next four bars of the composition, down to a concert C and then up a half step for two bars each, I can create a reasonable improvisation with the right notes, even in a bit more complex harmonic setting. Let's do the first 8 bars of Just Friends. I'll show you what I mean. 1, 2, 3. You get the idea. The beauty of this kind of practice with a student is that you can have a conversation about lofty things like phrasing, articulation, dynamics, overall musicality. It gets their head in a space where they're really thinking about music and not just about tools and techniques. Now, I'm not trying to say that at some point there aren't going to be a lot of serious hours of practice and exploration of harmony and all the finite elements of jazz. But this is a way, again, to get beginning improvisers to have confidence, have success, and ultimately play the right notes. Let me go one more step for you over to the board, and I'll show you some examples in 5 minutes or less of how to derive the appropriate chords and the related scales for the 12-bar blues that we played on, and give you another technique or two as how to apply those for young improvisers. This is a bit more advanced, but a logical next step from where we are now, and it might also help teachers and band directors to understand how to figure out the right chords and related scales if that's a bit confusing to you as well. Let's go over to the board. So here we are at the board. What we're going to be doing is just taking a very brief look at harmony and related scales, particularly building chords for every chord change symbol that you see, like C major 7. Of course, it implies the root. It implies that it's a major third and a major 7th degree above the root. But there are 4 other notes that it implies as well. The natural 5th is there, the 9th, 11th, and the 13th. And to really understand harmony, you need to understand that and not make those extensions some deep, dark mystery, because they're really quite simple. And I'll show you how to get started. The first rule that we have to work with is easy to remember, is that if a chord is a major 7 chord, it is always a tonic. It's always a 1. Now that's going to help us understand how to derive those upper extensions. In other words, C major 7 is in the key of C, and the C major scale goes with C major 7. It's just that simple. A minor 7 chord equals a 2 minor 7. What does that mean? A 2 chord in some major key. It simply means that it is the root of this minor 7 is the 2nd degree of some major scale. So again, if it's B flat minor 7, that means B flat is the 2nd degree of an A flat major scale. Thus A flat major, that tonality and that major scale, feeds this chord. And then the last chord you need to know about are dominant 7s. We'll take that same B flat now and turn it into a dominant 7th chord. Every dominant 7 equals a 5 chord in some key. What that means is we find out what scale or key B flat is the 5th degree of, and we find out what chord or what scale or what tonality feeds this chord. B flat is indeed the 5th degree of E flat. So the E flat major scale and the E flat major tonality feeds this chord. Once you understand that major 7s are always tonics, minor 7s are always 2 chords, dominant 7s are always 5 chords, we have an excellent point of departure to construct these. And here we go. All right, a C major 7. Let's start with something, so I don't have to do all, I'm not going to do all 3, I'll do like 2. Let's start with C minor 7, constructing the entire chord. C minor 7. Now if you recall, minor 7s are always 2 chords. So that means that C is the second degree of a B flat major scale, and thus B flat, that key and major scale, feeds this chord. Now let me explain what feeds means. First, we know what the root is. The root is the C. And now we simply go up in thirds from the C until we reach the 13th and start over again on the tonic using notes from the B flat major scale. It's that simple. So a third up from C in the key of B flat would be an E flat. Going up a third from there in the key of B flat would be a G. That's the 5th. Another third would be the B flat. Now we get into the extensions. The 9th is simply a third above the 7th in the key, which is B flat. So the 9th is a D natural. The 11th is an F natural. And the 13th is an A natural. And if we were to go another third, we'd be back at the root and start over again. And indeed, every chord can be built up to the 13th. Now, of course, there are exceptions to all these rules I'm giving, and I have to put this disclaimer in because in advanced improvisation, chords function as many different things. But for 99% of the material you're going to encounter in high school and even most college bands, what I'm telling you is correct and accurate and is going to work very well. So here we have a C minor 7 built all the way up to the 13th. All of those notes are available to us for improvisation. To create the related scale that goes with C minor, you can read in books, oh, it's a Dorian scale, or it's a minor 7 scale. They have all kinds of names. The name is not important. What's important is that you know how to construct it. And once you've built this chord up to the 13th, you've already constructed the scale. You just have to put the chord, which is in thirds, into steps. So we bring the 9th down and put it between the root and the third. We bring the 11th down and put it between the third and the 5th. We bring the 13th down and put it between the 5th and the 7th. And we end up with C, bring the 9th down, the D, then the 3rd, E flat, bring the 11th down, F, then the 5th, G, bring the 13th down, the A, then the 7th, B flat, and then of course we're back to C. Now, if you look at this, this is indeed, starting from the C, a Dorian scale. It's also a B flat major scale starting on C. It's not particularly important what it's called, but how it functions and where it came from, that being it functions as a 2 chord in some key, and it came from the tonality of B flat, and this chord has important meaning. Sam, let me ask you to do a favor. Can you sit down at the piano and play for me a C minor 7 chord? That's 1, 3, 5, 7, which is what Sam is playing at the piano. But these notes are also available. Play it one more time. You'll notice as I go up on the 9th, 11th, and 13th, the sound gets more removed and a bit more colorful. One more time, Sam. And that really gives you some indication of what I call harmonic hierarchy, which means the upper structures are going to be a bit more removed, the lower structures are a bit more grounded. So I can play the chord broken up, or I can play the related scale. The good news is this concept works for any chord, no matter how colorful it is. I'll show you what I mean. Oftentimes, again in high school, even when players are getting a bit more advanced, they find themselves in a situation where they encounter an altered chord in the improvised section or in a tune they're working with in their small group, and it scares them. They don't know what to do with it. Well, this same procedure helps to define the entire chord and the related scale. I'll show you what I mean. Going back to our C dominant 7th example, an example of an altered chord one might see in a big band chart would be C7 with a flatted 9th degree and a raised 5th degree. So let's understand how to construct that and create that chord, and then create a scale that goes along with it as well. Well, let's start with the basic C7 chord from which this comes from. It's still a 5 chord, even though it has these extra numbers after it. So if it's a 5 chord, it comes from some major key, and that major key is the key of F. C is the 5th degree of the F major scale. So we simply build a C7 going up in thirds from the root using notes from the key of F up to the 13th. There's a C7. Now all we do is apply these alterations to the chord, which we take the 9th degree and flat it. So root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, and we flat that degree of the scale. And the 5th degree we raise, root, 3rd, 5th. We sharp that note. A little difficult to read, but I think you can see it. And now we have the chord that is C7, flat 9, plus 5. We apply the same technique we did with the minor chord, bringing down the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th, and create the scale that goes along with this chord. So it's the root C to the 9th D flat. We continue to the 3rd, the 11th, F natural, the 5th, which is raised, remember. The 7th is the next note available to us. And then we're back to the root. Now, if we play the scale, it might actually sound a little familiar to you, although it looks a bit complex there. If I play it starting on the F, it may sound even more familiar. Indeed, it's a harmonic minor scale built off of F. But if I start explaining to a student, this is a harmonic minor scale built off an F, or give it some other name like the flat 9 plus 5 scale, or the Pomeroy scale, or something of that nature, it's going to be pretty confusing, that student. And once again, we're putting them in the world of vocabulary and lingo that can be kind of daunting. But this idea of taking a basic C7, applying the alterations, and then creating a scale, a linear stepwise motion, we now have the chord to play, we now have the scale to play. We can create an intelligible harmonic improvisation on C7, flat 9, plus 5 that makes sense and has the right notes without any guessing going on. You can limit these chords that students have to work with, choose compositions that just have 1 or 2 examples of altered chords, get them into it gradually, get them to work on it, and know it yourself so that you're not sitting there accepting a lot of wrong notes. Even if they're played with a lot of confidence and exuberance, if it turns out to be just a lot of flailing, you got to rein them in and make sure that, especially if they're at the level where they have the ability to understand harmony, rein them in so they can capture the correct notes and the sound of the harmony. So what we're going to do here is just take the chord and the related scale over C minor that I put on the board, and I'm going to play around with those notes. I'll start with the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, the bottom of the chord, so you can hear how that has a grounding nature, and then I'll improvise on the top of the chord, the 9th, the 11th, and 13th, and then I'll mix the scalar elements with breaking up the chord in thirds, and you can hear how the two work together to give 2 different textures to the improviser. Here we go. We're just going to vamp on C minor 7. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mixing the two together, staying very diatonic, but understanding the right notes and knowing that when I'm playing the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, I'm more grounded sounding against the harmony. And when I play that 13th or that 11th or 9th, I'm floating a little bit more, and I get more that sense of advanced harmonic application, if you will. It's just simply using the diatonic extensions. It's exactly what I had on the board. So let me extend this now into a complex situation. Let's say you have an improviser that can learn a single chord well in its related scale. They work on it, they develop it, and they could do what I just did successfully. But here they're sitting in band, and let's say we're going to do a chart. For the sake of being as complex as possible, I'm going to choose the tune Giant Steps. Let's say you have a big band chart on giant steps. Any high school player, most high school players would look at that and really feel set off by having to improvise over those complex chord changes. But what you can do as a teacher, don't be afraid when the solo comes to, again, encourage the students to do everything I talked about, playing the melody as an improvisation, and then put a section in. Find an appropriate little harmonic movement that you can stick 8, 12, or 16 bars in on a single chord in the midst of the arrangement. Just have everybody pencil in a repeat and say, rhythm section, we're going to play such and such a chord here for so many bars, and then we're going to go on with the arrangement. I'll give you an example of what I would do. Here's Giant Steps. We're going to ask the rhythm section. We're going to play a chorus of Giant Steps, just as composed. And then at the end of the form, we're going to play 16 bars of an F7 sus chord. F7 sus would use the scale that I played in the last example, which is a C minor 7, which is the B flat major scale. I can play any notes from that scale, and they're going to work. So what we're doing is we're going to play Giant Steps, then we're going to have 16 bars that we're adding to the arrangement to improvise on, to give a simple format for the improviser to think about all the creative things and not worry about all the harmonic things. And then we'll go back into Giant Steps. And when I go into Giant Steps, I'm going to just play the melody with some expressivity, phrasing, articulation. I'm going to use all those elements and wait for those 16 bars of the open chord change on which to improvise. This is for that intermediate student that has a lot of ability and some knowledge of harmony and has to improvise in a complex setting. You as the teacher, as the director, take it upon yourself to add a little section to an arrangement and give them a place to use the level of skills that are available to them. Here's an example. 1, 2, I want 3, 3. They can improvise, and in the scope of the musical presentation of the chart, it's going to be very successful, and the student is going to have artistic and musical success. One last thing I'm going to do, and we'll fade out on this as we play, because we're going to do something that I encourage, again, even my youngest students to play. There was a wonderful book quite a few years ago, 15 or more years ago, that was a series for teaching students piano, not just jazz piano, but all piano, starting with jazz improvisation as the initial point at the piano. It was written by a wonderful teacher named Marcia Dunstan, and she had this idea of exercises where the teacher would simply play take 5 in the key of A minor, which means they could play on just the white keys and play that nice groove from take 5 in 5/4, and have 3- and 4-year-old kids come up and tell them, you can play anything you want on the white keys, knock yourself out. And you'd be amazed and how much success. Not everything was tasteful, of course, and appropriate, but the kids had a lot of fun. They were playing the piano, and they were using their creative mind, their improvisational mind. So even the youngest students, when I do a workshop at a school, I try to get students in small groups, even 3 or 4 horn players, or if we have a rhythm section, or even an entire big band, where we explore free improvisation, completely removing any bounds of rhythm, harmony, or specific melodic concepts, and just asking students to do one simple thing. Listen and respond to each other. Have a conversation with your instrument in your hand, with the vocabulary, the techniques, and talents at your disposal. That means an advanced improviser can sit there with a beginning improviser, and if people are truly listening, which often you have to encourage them to do it, pull it in when it seems to be getting a little too wild. But if they're really listening, you'll find that people start to tap in to a very particular place in their brain and in their thinking process, and they're exploring creativity and improvisation. So getting your students to just simply freely improvise, listen to one another, and create a composition out of what they know is a fun way of exploring improvisation without all of the other boundaries. One last word, of course, as I said before. Ultimately, you are going to have to encourage your students to do the hard work necessary to become a really proficient and expert and certainly artistic improviser. There's no shortcut. But these kind of things can help students get on the path and understand that improvisation is not some mysterious, deep, complex thing. It is indeed something we do in our everyday lives and something that is available to everyone from the youngest child on up. So here's a little bit of free improvisation. Once again, I'd like to thank banddirectors.com, our students here at Wayne State University, and you for checking this out. I hope it's helpful. Here we go, some free improv, guys. Whatever comes out, comes out.